Hey, listen, do you want perfect espresso at home? Well, you can't get it without Crema, and you can't get Crema without 9 bars of pressure. But you can get both with this piece of equipment, the Flair. Find out more here on Bean Basics. Oh, hey there. Welcome to Bean Basics with Bob and Michelle. Welcome to sunny Saugatuck, and welcome to our home and kitchen. Hey, listen, today we're talking about the Flair, and the Flair comes with its own carrying case. But before we get there, I wanted to mention that we've talked about Cheater's Espresso, using the Bialetti and using the AeroPress. And the reason it's called Cheater's Espresso is because these never reach 9 bars of pressure. And if you don't reach 9 bars of pressure, you don't get Crema. And if you don't have Crema, you don't have espresso. So let me show you the Flair. And we're gonna assemble it. These are all the parts that come with it. You have the base, you have the drip tray, and you have the lever. And the lever's kind of fun because, you know, in our business, like at a Big B Coffee, when we make a shot of espresso, we call that pulling a shot, right? And in the old days, espresso machines didn't have electric pumps to pump the water through under 9 bars of pressure. They had a pump that you would pull like this, and it would create a vacuum and push that water through. Well, here we're using a lever, and we're gonna push it through that way. Now, let me show you how all that's gonna work. So we've got a lot of parts here, and it's just like an espresso machine. I'm gonna start with this little piece right here, because this would be, in the espresso business, a portafilter. And that's that thing that you see people put coffee into and tamp and all that business. You can see there's a screen on the bottom. And so that's where our coffee is gonna go into. Now on the bottom of this, we put this. There is a screen here, but sometimes it can splash about. But if we put this on, it'll come out in a steady stream. After we put about our 15 grams of coffee in there, what we're gonna do is put this screen right on top, just like that. And then we're gonna take the water chamber and put that on top. And so there's a little line right here. We're gonna fill hot water up to that line right there.
I can't see the line, but I think that's okay.
It's okay because I can barely see it myself. The line is not perfect. And then finally, we have our plunger, okay? And that's what the lever is gonna push down on to create the 9 bars. And this Flair gives you a nice little gauge that lets you see that you actually hit 9 bars of pressure. And when we're all done, we'll take it back apart, and they give you this device so that you can put this back out, just like this, and wash everything out. Okay, so let's get started. One of the things to understand is that this brewing chamber, like, it's at room temperature. If I touch it, it's almost cool to the touch. And if we put hot water in here at the right temperature, this metal will steal all the heat away. So one of the things that we need to do when using a Flair is to preheat this chamber. And it has a big metal mass, so it'll hold that temperature quite well. But out of my water kettle, and I'm going actually not at 206, but almost to the boil. And I'm gonna go almost to the boil because we'll lose heat as goes along here, and that's okay. All right, the other thing now that has to happen is we have to get our coffee in the chamber. And we're gonna grind some coffee, and we do have Big B Espresso E-Bar blend. And espresso is not so much a blend, but a method of production, just like the one we're using right here. But one of the things that's really important is that you must grind fresh. Crema comes from the release of CO2. And if we grind too soon, that CO2 will be lost. And we don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna fresh grind some coffee. And I'm using my Vario W, and it's at the finest possible setting that it can be. Is it a true espresso? blend or a true espresso grind. Not really, but it's the closest thing you can get. Now what I'm going to do using my scale here is to weigh out the grams of coffee. And you know, I think the ideal for this right here is about 15 grams of coffee. I'm going to use Michelle to help me out here a little bit and get that dosage proper. And
You're at 13.5.
this is where it gets tricky.
Yeah. 15.2.
That's close enough. We'll take it. Now, this is clearly overflowing the chamber, so I'm going to tap it down a little bit. But the other thing that's going to happen, you can stay right there, is I've got my tamper. This is just like what happens in a Big B coffee. And I'm going to first push it down and give it an initial twist. Okay, now I got to bring it back to me because I'm going to actually have to use my body weight a little bit. So you can see the espresso is below the line at this point. I'm going to give it a knock and a tap. And the reason to do that is to get all these loose grounds off. But I'm going to actually go in for the tamp now and the polish. And so I'm going to lay that flat, push down with my body weight. I keep my arm at a right angle, and I twist once, and I twist twice, and that gives me the polish. That's basically how we do it in the Big B coffee. Now we have some automated methods now, because if you do that for 600 cups in a day, you might get carpal tunnel. So we have something that actually does that for you today, the tamping in a mechanical way. All right, we're gonna get our screen on top, and now we're ready to assemble our water chamber. And this is, I mean, it's hot to the touch. And so we're gonna slide that right on top, get it back on the scale, tear it back out, because what I'm looking to do, am I at 0?
You are at 0.
Is to get about 60 grams of water. So I had 15 grams of coffee. I'm looking to get about 60 grams of water or to that line. And I think that'll be about the same thing.
You're at 56.7.
All right, gets dicey here.
57. 59.2.
All right, that's not bad.
60.3. It's pretty good.
Okay, pretty good. All right. And now we need to put our little plunger device on, and we'll just nestle that. You don't want to push it too hard, or we might start pushing the espresso through. Gonna bring our lever device back up here and insert this whole shoot match right here. And of course, I need to get an espresso cup there. And what I'm gonna do is push until I see, not very vigorously, till I see an initial drop. And when I get to that first drop, it's coming. There we go. Now I'm going to push hard, and you can watch me get to 9 bars of pressure pretty quickly. And if you get down below, you can see the crema. Okay. Am I holding at 9 bars?
You are. You're at 10.
That's a little much. All right. Well, look at that. We just shot our shot. And that's a beautiful cup of espresso. Now, one thing that I need to tell you, because I'm going to drink this right away, and then we're going to talk about crema a little bit, okay? One of the things I'm going to do is actually stir this before I drink it. And the reason I'm going to give it a little stir is this. One, there are layers of flavor in this espresso. In the top layer, we have the crema, which is a lot of CO2. In the middle layer, we have oils, and in the lower layer, we have solids. And by stirring it, we stir all those things together so that when we consume it, we consume them simultaneously. The other reason we stir is to release the aroma, because so much of drinking anything is aroma. And then the last reason is it actually cools it down a little bit so that you can do this. And really drink, a shot of espresso. All right, that's how you make a perfect espresso. But let me talk about crema a little bit and the role that it plays in espresso production. So crema is really just foam. It's an Italian name for foam. And by foam, we just mean bubbles. Think about like dish soap bubbles. Well, in order to get bubbles, you need something called a surfactant. And a surfactant is a surface acting agent. And in coffee, there are a couple different surfactants. One is polysaccharides, and the other one is a browned protein. But what is that surfactant surrounding? Well, what it's surrounding is CO2. So when we roast coffee, I thought I had some coffee beans around here. I guess I don't. Did I leave them somewhere?
They're right by the mocha pot.
Go. Thank you. When we roast coffee beans, what happens is there's an accumulation of CO2 in here, okay? And that accumulation of CO2, when you espresso coffee, when you use the espresso method, the CO2 is released. Now that CO2 can only be released with 9 bars of pressure. That kind of high pressure pushes the CO2 out. Well, as the CO2 comes out, it's bubbling out, and these surfactants surround it, making these micro bubbles that we refer to as crema. Now, if you can think about it, it's not much different than even a Coca-Cola, right? So if I pour this Coke right here, right now, we know there's CO2 that's put into this. And you know what this is? This is crema, or foam, right? Now the surfactants aren't as strong. That's why the bubbles dissipate, right? This Coke does not have those polysaccharides, does not have those brown proteins, but it does have CO2, which gets released into a crema. And you know what? A head of beer is the same thing, or a Guinness. Guinness has those micro bubbles because it's nitrogen. Pretty interesting. So, producing an espresso, the way you know that you've got it good is when you have beautiful crema. You can only get beautiful crema under 9 bars of pressure. It comes from a roasted bean. Now, when we make an espresso blend, sometimes we're using Arabica coffee, and sometimes we're using a Robusta, or sometimes we're using a combination of both. Now, in most espresso blends, there's just a little bit of Robusta, maybe a lot of Robusta. But the reason there's more Robusta is because Arabica coffee has more oils. Robusta has less oils. So one of the damaging components to keeping that bubble shape is fat or lipids or oils, right? So think about whipping egg whites, right? First you have to separate the eggs, and they tell you don't get any of that yolk in there. And the reason they tell you don't get any of that yolk in there is because that yolk has fat in it, and those lipids will destroy those egg whites if you were trying to get those bubbles, right? So the reason to put some Robusta in is it has less fat than the Arabica beans. Now the other thing is that Robusta is also a smaller bean and a more compact bean. And so for whatever reason, while it's roasted, it gathers more CO2, therefore producing more crema. Okay? Crema is absolutely essential to the taste of espresso, or should I say to the taste expectation of an espresso. There's some people that believe that maybe you should take the crema off and put it to the side and then drink the espresso. Why? Because that's primarily CO2. But we've learned over the years, right? This is our expectation, that we have a lot of crema, and that will be the proof that our coffee is fresh and fresh ground, and that it has a lot of CO2 in there, giving it flavor. I mean, even when you drink a beer or a Coke, sometimes you get that foam. We think it contributes to the flavor profile, and it does. Well, anyway, I think you've got the idea. If you want a great home espresso, use the Flair. You know, on the low end, this is about $120. At the high end, it's $250. Now, the Bialetti and the AeroPress are between $20 and $30, right? So a lot less, and we can make cheaters espresso with them, not with 9 bars of pressure. But at $250, we're starting to get at the bottom end of an electronic device that can do this for you at home. But at the bottom end of those electronic devices, the big question is whether you're really getting 9 bars, right? And so a home espresso machine that has a pump and has a boiler is probably in the thousands of dollars range that would produce one that's as good as the Flair. All right, that's about it for this episode. I do want to remind you this is brought to you by One Big On in Space, and One Big On in Space is on a mission to make Big B coffee 50% farm direct. And if you want to help us in that endeavor, go to our blog, go to the contact page, ask us for a free t-shirt. You got to give us your home address, and you got to give us your t-shirt size. And the only thing we ask out of you in return is that when you wear it, you tell people about the Big B Farm Direct program. Final note, when you love the world will love you right back. Hey, thanks for joining us. For future episodes, click the subscribe button. Bean Basics is brought to you by OneBigIslandInspace.com with 2 G's.